If your squash plants bloom, but they never produce squash, if your cucumbers are struggling, if your tomatoes seem disappointing despite your best efforts, the problem might not be your soil, your fertilizer, or your watering schedule. The missing piece might be pollinators. Today we're talking about why pollinators matter, which pollinators you want to attract, and simple ways to make your garden a place they'll visit all season long. Let's dig in. Welcome back to Homegrown, your backyard garden podcast. I'm your host, Kathy Rogers from oakhillhomestead.com. Today we're talking about pollinators, those hard-working creatures that move pollen from flower to flower and help many of our vegetables produce our food. And the good news is, attracting more pollinators to your garden doesn't require expensive equipment or even a dedicated butterfly garden. Small changes can make a big difference. So let's start with the basics. Pollination happens when pollen moves from one flower to another, allowing plants to produce fruit and seeds. No pollination means fewer tomatoes, fewer cucumbers, less squash, and smaller overall harvests. Some plants are wind-pollinated, others are self-pollinating, but many of our garden vegetables benefit from insects moving through the garden and doing what they naturally do. You can hand-pollinate plants if necessary. Some gardeners do this with squash plants or cucumbers, but personally I'd rather let the bees handle the workload. Pollinators make our gardens more productive, but pollinator populations have struggled in recent years because of habitat loss, insecticides, and landscapes that are simply too tidy. The encouraging part is, gardeners can help. Your backyard, even a few containers on a patio, can become part of the solution. When people think of pollinators, they usually think of honeybees. Honeybees are important. Years ago, I even kept bees for a while, which gave me enormous respect for how much work they do. But honeybees are only part of the story. Pollinators also include bumblebees, native bees like mason bees and leafcutter bees, butterflies and moths, hoverflies, beetles, and even bats in some regions. And different pollinators prefer different flowers. That diversity matters because if one pollinator population struggles, others may help fill the gap. A garden with many kinds of pollinators is generally a healthier garden. Here are some simple ways you can attract more pollinators to your garden. First, plant flowers that bloom through the whole season. Pollinators need food from early spring until fall. This is one of the most commonly made mistakes, having plenty of flowers in June, but nothing blooming in April or September. So think in seasons instead. In early spring you have weeds such as dandelions and henbit, and also fruit trees in bloom. Those early weeds are some of the first food sources available after winter. I put off mowing our lawn as long as practical, because those little flowers that grow in the grass really matter. In summer, zinnias, basil flowers, dill, borage, calendula, even your tomato plants in bloom, provide food for pollinators. Many herbs are excellent pollinator plants if you allow some to go to flower instead of harvesting every stem. In the late season, flowers blooming into fall help pollinators prepare for winter. Aim to have something flowering all season. Second, choose simple flowers instead of highly doubled blooms. Those fancy extra full flowers that look like pom-poms, they're beautiful, but all of those petals can make the pollen harder to reach. Pollinators usually prefer the simpler blooms. Zinnias and daisies, for instance, those flat petals, they act like landing pads for insects. So think of single zinnias, coneflowers, daisies, cosmos, open-faced flowers with easy landing spots. Sometimes the old-fashioned varieties are better for wildlife. Third, add some water to your garden. Pollinators need water too. This can be incredibly simple. I use shallow dishes with pebbles or stones so that bees and butterflies have somewhere safe to land while they drink. One of my favorites is literally an upside-down frisbee with pebbles in it. Not fancy, but it works really well. Refilling these water stations daily takes less than a minute and they can become surprisingly busy on hot afternoons. And fourth, leave a little wildness in your garden. A perfectly manicured yard often produces very little habitat. Many native bees nest in the bare soil. Leaf litter can provide shelter, and hollow stems may become nesting spaces. But this doesn't mean your garden must look neglected. It simply means allowing a little room for nature. And of course, be cautious with insecticides. I've mentioned this before in other episodes. Think carefully before you spray. Even products that claim they're safe for organic gardens can affect the beneficial insects. Sometimes accepting a little cosmetic damage is worthwhile if it means maintaining balance in the garden. That can be hard. I understand wanting perfect leaves and flawless plants, but a living garden usually has a few chew marks somewhere. If all this feels overwhelming, start with these 3 things. Plant pollinator-friendly flowers, perhaps on the edge of your garden beds or maybe in between the vegetables. Provide water, and reduce spraying wherever possible. These alone can make a noticeable difference. You don't need acres. You don't need a formal pollinator garden. You can start with a pot of zinnias and a shallow water dish. Here's something I've noticed after years of gardening. A garden with pollinators feels different. You begin noticing more. The slow drift of butterflies, bumblebees working flowers with absolute determination, the small living things you would have missed before. My grandson used to be afraid of bees. Last summer he stood beside a flowering basil plant and watched one closely while explaining what it was doing. He was still cautious, and he was noticeably nervous, but he was curious too, and that felt important to me somehow. Children naturally notice these things when we give them the chance, and maybe adults need that too, because attracting pollinators isn't only about producing more tomatoes, although more tomatoes are certainly welcome. It's also about creating a garden that feels alive, and those living gardens often give back more than vegetables. They give us a reason to slow down and let the stress of the day fall off of our shoulders. If you'd like help planning a productive garden, including the layout, companion planting, plant choices, and creating a garden that supports pollinators as well as harvests, you'll find information about the Homegrown Garden Blueprint Workbook in the show notes. And if you'd like to see photos of some of the pollinators visiting my own garden, I'll include those in the transcript at oakhillhomestead.com. Thank you for hanging out in the garden with me today. I'm hoping that you'll make time to run out to your garden for a minute so you can watch the butterflies. We're here with a new episode every other Tuesday. Be sure to subscribe so you won't miss a single episode. And I'll see you here next time on Homegrown, your backyard garden podcast.